Good day, everyone, and welcome to this Murray Gallatin San Diego, Israel event. A very special welcome to the professors and students on the call with us. And also thank you to all of our supporters and partners. We are very grateful for your support. I'm Susan Lapidus, the director of the MGSDII, and we bring modern Israel to universities and our community. To learn more about us, check out all the information on our website. It's robust. It tells you about future events and everything we're doing. So it's mgsdii.org. And we'll put that in the chat. Oh, I think he just did it. Today, I'm particularly proud to bring you this esteemed panel of filmmakers, scholars, and political activists to have a conversation about the film Our Natural Right and the Israeli Declaration of Independence, which was signed May 14th, 1948, terminating the British mandate at midnight. The photographs and clips used in the film are really outstanding and beautiful, and the issues raised resonate with us even today. Before I introduce our panelists, a little housekeeping. You could begin writing your questions at any time in the chat, and we'll get to them right after the panel's presentation. And if you want someone specific to answer your question, please put that also with your question. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists. Yulie Cohen, Yulie, wave. Is the director of the film. She's a filmmaker and distinguished lecturer based in Jaffa. Her acclaimed trilogy, My Terrorist, My Land Zion, and My Brother, have been shown at hundreds of international film festivals, translated into more than 20 languages, is part of many academics' libraries, and has been discussed at conferences in Israel and abroad. In 1978, just to give you a little background on Yulie, I think this is really fascinating. Yulie was wounded in a PLO terrorist attack when she was a flight attendant with El Al. She was attacked with other crew members when they were entering a hotel in London. 23 years later, she made a film about her story. It's a documentary about peace and forgiveness. Her film, My Brother, also is really topical, and maybe we'll have a whole event just on these films, Yulie. It's about her search for her brother, who became ultra-Orthodox and whom she lost contact with 25 years ago. Welcome, Yulie, and thanks for being with us. Nitzan Kahana, Nitzan, will you wave, is a lawyer and an activist. She's listed in Forbes 30 Under 30. And winner of the Rappaport Prize. She's the granddaughter of Rabbi Kalman and is one of the speakers in the film, which you've all seen. Nitzan is also an activist in the fight against trafficking women in Israel. And one day also, maybe we'll do something to hear more about that. Professor Yoram Shacher, who was delayed, he'll be with us very soon, is the former dean of the law school at IDC Herzliya. He received his doctorate from Oxford University. His research interests are criminal law, the Israeli Supreme Court, the Israeli Declaration of Independence, and comparative law. And of course, Udi, Nir and Sagi Bornstein are the producers of the film. They were in San Diego, was it a year ago? Seems like ages ago before Corona.
Seems like decades ago, yeah.
Yeah, to screen their film Golda, which was really also wonderful. And Golda screened in over 50 festivals worldwide and earned a nomination in the Israeli Oscars for Best Documentary Film. And they're very good friends of ours, and we're thrilled that they gave us the sneak preview. This has not been screened anywhere else, and we're very honored. So before we get started, welcome to our panel. Thank you so much for being here. And as soon as Yoram comes on, we will notify everyone. So before we get started, just to refresh our memories, we'll watch the trailer of the film, and then we'll go right into our discussion and Q&A. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
This is where it happened. As they say in Hebrew, Ashkara, this is where it happened.
על הבמה הזאת יש קונסנזוס מוחלט והסכמה. אירוע כזה כבר לא יחזור.
לפיכך נתכנסנו חברי מועצת העם. תוקף זכותנו הטבעית וההיסטורית. אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל. היא מדינת ישראל.
אני נכדה של רב חרדי שחתם על מגילה שהקימה מדינה.
סבא שלי ראה בזה אחד מפסגות חייו.
אני אהבתי לחשוב שסבא שלי חתם על זה, כי אהבתי את סבא שלי והייתי נורא פטריוטית.
זה הסמלה שהיא לבשה. אני לא יודע, אני לא רוצה לפתוח. אני מפחד איזה 70 שנה בארון.
מדינת ישראל תקיים שוויון זכויות גמור.
כשאני עומד מול החתימה של סבתי, ואני חושב, איפה האחריות שלי? איפה הדור שלנו? אנחנו מחויבים בעצם לעשות משהו לקיום המגילה הזאת.
סבא שלי כבר, חבר'ה, אני בפוליטיקה, אבל אני משביע אתכם שלא תרוצו אפילו לוועד הבית, כי אתם לא יודעים למה אתם נכנסים.
סבא היה שם מטעמים מאוד מאוד אידיאליסטיים.
אישה אחת בין, לא יודע כמה, גברים. סבתא שלי הקדיש את חייה לנשים.
הסבא שלי לא רצה להיות שר משטרה, הוא רצה להיות שופט. אבל האצולה היקית והרוסית לא נתנו לו.
Ben Gurion says, we hereby declare on the establishment of, can you continue? The establishment of? No, that's the wrong answer.
עד הרגע האחרון הם התווכחו על הניסוחים, יותר יהודית, פחות יהודית הדתן. בשם המדינה היהודית אנחנו חיים במדינת אפרטהייד, טוטליטרית.
כל הנושא של הכיבוש הפך להיות לא רלוונטי, לא מדובר.
הכל זה הכיבוש והכיבוש והכיבוש והכיבוש. מה רע לכם כל כך שצריך כל הזמן להילל ולבכות?
יש לנו פה נס גדול מאוד. יש פה אימפריה לא נורמלית.
צבא חזק ומודרני, מוזיקאים גדולים, זוכי פרס נובל.
אנחנו כבר לא מדענים גדולים, ואנחנו כבר לא סופרים גדולים.
אנחנו לא מתקדמים, אנחנו הולכים אחורה, בקבלה של האנשים שהם שונים מאיתנו. יש עוד מדינה במזרח התיכון שמתחילה להתקרב אלינו? זה בדיוק מה שכתוב במגילת העצמאות, זה קרה וזה הגשמת נבואה.
Okay, so let's get started. There's a lot of opinions going on there. So Udi and Yulie, let's start from the beginning. How and why did you start the work on this documentary?
Thank you for having all of us, first of all, and for holding this event. And yes, absolutely a lot of opinions. As you know, if you put two Jews in a room, you have 4 opinions at least. And it was the case in this production as well. We started this project a couple of years ago. Actually, you mentioned Golda, the film that we did before, and it actually sort of started from our work on Golda, because working on Golda, we got to know Gideon Meir, who's also interviewed in this film and was interviewed in Golda. And we started to speak with him about Golda's life. And for him, I think, and for her personally, one of the high moments of her life was when she signed the Israeli Declaration of Independence. And we were having a chat with him about her legacy and things that he feels he needs to do as the person who's sort of in charge for her legacy. And I think very early on, what caught our interest was, here is a group of 37 people, mostly men, 2 women only, Golda among them, who established the country. And of course, there were a lot of people who were part of establishing this place, but they were the ones sitting down, drafting and signing the official document that started this country. And they were representatives of pretty much every sect within the Israeli, or back then the Jewish society in this land, ranging from the ultra-Orthodox and all the way to the communists and the far left. So it was really quite a spectrum of people. And we were, first of all, our first question was basically who are these people who established the country, and wouldn't it be interesting to sort of re-examine them, their stories, their families, and see where these 37 families are today, or who are their descendants, And more than that, what do they think about modern day Israel and the current issues that we're facing today? I think that was the first thing. And then the second thing was the declaration itself, which is a fascinating document. It has almost no legal validity, but it keeps getting referred to. I remember, and Yulie probably remembers as well, when we were working on the film, we constantly sent each other links of, we had quite a few elections in the last couple of years in Israel, and throughout election processes in Israel, there's always people quoting the Declaration of Independence and giving it a sort of as their justification for a certain policy or idea. And the interesting thing is that that is done, again, from the far right to the far left and all the way through the middle. So it's a kind of meeting place, I don't know, of ideas. It was back then and it still is. And we found it interesting that it's still being debated so heavily or used so heavily within the political discourse in Israel. And just to give it a little bit of frame, I think that this document was the first attempt to sort of define the rights and the reasons that Jewish people have to establish this country in this specific location, and to sort of pave the road on what kind of country should it be. We'll talk a little bit later about how vague and why was it so vague when they defined everything. But I think when you look into this text, for me, there are three main questions that arise from it that are still three of the most important questions we face today in our day-to-day lives here when we talk about the country. One is this constant battle, I would say, between a Jewish state and a democratic state. Can these things really live together? What does that mean? How much weight do we give each side? I found it fascinating to discover when we started the work that there is that the word democratic is actually not in the declaration. And Professor Yoram Shacher, who will be joining us a little bit later, I think can elaborate a little bit about that. He's done a lot of research about how and why the word democratic is actually not in the declaration. But one issue is this Jewish and democratic balance. The second, I would say, is the secular and the religious components within Israeli society. They really clashed when they were trying to draft this document, and they've never stopped clashing ever since. And it's, I mean, if you read the news in Israel in the last couple of days, this drift between the two parts of the society is still very much evident. Also with coronavirus and with other topics today, it always remains a big political question. And then the third for me would be the relationship between Jews and Arabs, or Jews and non-Jews in general within Israel. What kind of place is there for non-Jews in this Jewish state? And again, how do you reconcile that with democratic values, equality, and so on? And these three fundamental questions, I think, lie at the basis of the questions debated in the declaration and still lie in the base of our life here today. So I think that's what sort of drew us. These are the things that drew us into the project. And Yulie, would you like to add anything? At a certain point, we invited Yulie to direct the film. We knew her from previous project and admired her work and thought that it would be an interesting match. And I have to say, when you first told me about your little connection to the declaration, I'll let you tell that. That was the moment when I said, okay, this is definitely the person to direct this film.
So yeah, thank you. So yeah, when we first talked about it, I told Udi and Sagi that for almost 20 years, I used to have the declaration on the wall for my daughters to grow up with the text that I admired. And I really thought that it was an important text to grow on. I mean, we talked about it at home, but only when I started to work on the film and we decided to make the text a major, I would say, issue, I realized that I didn't really know the text so well when I had it on my wall, especially what I found out after during making the film and interviewing the grandchildren and editing the film. what I found out is that we are missing 25% of the population of the State of Israel in the declaration. And since then, more than 70 years, we're still missing 25% of the citizens who are not Jews in the State of Israel. And I find it really I would say shameful in a way that we ignore, and we still ignore. And you know, lately we had this basic law, Israel as a nation state for the Jewish people only. So it became even worse than it was not. I mean, nobody wrote anything about them in 1948. And during the 70 years, we ignored them as well, and it became even worse and worse. So anyway, I see that Professor Shacher is joining us. So let's give him the stage. I mean, Susan, you decide.
Yes. Mitch, is the professor, has he entered in?
Yep,
Yes.
and he's viewable now.
Yeah, we can see him. You can't see him?
Hold on, not yet.
There
you are. Hi, how are you? Welcome.
I'm fine.
Great, thank you for joining us. I introduced you in the beginning, so the audience knows about you, and we've just begun. So before we get to you, Professor, I think we want to, we were just going to go to Nitzan and then we'll go to you. And we also told everyone, just feel free to jump in at any point if you'd like to comment on what someone else is saying. So Nitzan, as really building on what Yulie just said, as an activist working in the public sphere, do you turn to the declaration signed by your grandfather for inspiration? What would you change in light of current day Israel?
So I want to start and say that when Yulie approached me, we actually knew each other because Yulie is a longtime activist in the fight against trafficking in women in Israel. And she asked me, "Are you the granddaughter of Nitzan Kahana?" And I was like, "Why are you asking that? Like, where does that come from?" And when she told me about the movie, I was so excited because I felt like it's rebuilding something that was a bit like, I don't want to say broken, but 22 years before the movie came out, it was 50 to Israel, and I was 12 years old. And one of the newspapers in Israel interviewed all the sons of the persons who signed the declaration about the signatures. And all the sons, and I have to say it was mostly sons, some daughters, said, there was like one specific question: what do you think? Would your father sign again the declaration? And 100% of them said no. And I was 12 years old, and I saw that the Haredic one, my uncle, says no because it's too secular. And the secular one says no because it's too religious, and left and right. And I remember being 12 years old and saying, how dare you? How dare you say that in the name of your parents? They were so brave. And although they had so much to fight about, and they could sit and say too secular, too religious, they decided to create this country and do this brave thing. How dare you do that? So I was so happy that I will have the opportunity now to speak in the name of my family. This is my family. You can see I'm very blessed. I have many uncles and aunts. I don't know if I can point. My grandfather in the middle, and my father is just above him.
Yeah.
My grandfather passed away when I was 4, and my father unfortunately passed away a year later. I was 5 when he passed away. And all my family that you can see here in the picture is a large ultra-Orthodox family. My family is not. I grew up religious. I'm not anymore. And I always say I'm very connected to my grandfather because though I'm not an ultra-Orthodox woman, I kept his way in going to politics. My grandfather was the head of the student union, of the Haredic student union in Berlin. I was the head of the student cell of the Labour Party or Avoda Party in Israel, and keep on going in his tracks. So coming to the movie, I said all the time to Yulie and Udi, I don't believe that I can speak in the name of my grandfather. I'm sure that if I would have been grown up and could have talked with him, we had so much things that we would have want to agree on, I will say, for the least. I'm an activist for women's rights, and I'm an activist for Haredic women's rights, and I'm against sending Haredic women to sit in the back of the bus. That is something was a big issue in Israel 10 years ago, and I was a major activist in this issue. But I always respect the fact that when he was 36 years old only, he took this risk and he helped to build this country. And he did it without, I believe they didn't, how to say that, sorry, maybe Udi, you can help me, Psharot.
Compromises.
Without a lot of compromises. He believed in what he did. He put his name on it. So I think that the movie did a lot of justice to the people who signed that. I really believe in what's written in our Declaration of Independence. I really believe in equal rights, and no matter if you're a gender or nationality, of course, I can really rely to what Yulie said. I think that it can be changed by acts. I want our politicians now to change that by acts. I really want that the law that Yulie refers to will be cancelled, of course. But I do believe that I'm not saying I'm a believer. I believe we can do much better. And although it's not an easy time in Israel now, it's fourth elections and everything around Corona, it gets even hotter in the streets. I think we're in, just like what happened in the States, in my opinion, we're very close to a new day that will come very soon.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Yes, the similarities.
Yeah, now we hear you.
Oh, here we go. The similarities are remarkable. So I'll throw it out to everybody. What do you think about the attempt to, I don't even want to say attempt, what do you think of the democracy going on now? And what do you think the next steps, and what can you learn from these people, who signed the declaration? And that's for anybody.
What's the question again? What do we think about the state of Israeli democracy nowadays?
About their attempt to form a democratic state, or maybe that wasn't the attempt at all.
I think maybe that'll be the time, Yoram, to refer it to you and ask you a little bit about the issue of the word democratic in the declaration. I have to say that when I came back, there was one day when we were working on the text. We had, it's not here anymore, but we had a copy of the declaration here, and we were looking through the text again and again to find things. And there was a moment when me and Sagi, and I think maybe Yulie were also with us, but we were talking about the declaration, and we were saying, okay, we need to find the quote with the democratic is in the text. And we were looking again and again and again and again, and I said, it's not possible. I know that the word democratic is there. Where did this ethos of democratic and Jewish came if it's not in the declaration? And so later on, I really found out that it's not in the text, but I actually also don't really know the story behind how it made it out of the text, basically. So Yoram, I'll give you the stage.
But Udi and Nitzan and everybody, try and find the word term independence in the declaration of, is it independence? There is no independence in the Declaration of Independence. There is no Nitzan, there is no democracy in the Declaration of, is it independence? There is so much myth, constructive myth. I understand that. We had to build a nation out of what a horrible, not horrible, pitiful bunch of refugees that we all found ourselves. Your grandfather, my parents, not you, not me, not Udi, but our forefathers. We found ourselves in this land, and there was this need to build a nation. And to build a nation, you need some constructive text. And for a text to work, it needs a myth, a narrative that surrounds it. So I think we are now so strong and so secure and actually so democratic, despite everything, that we can actually admit that we were none of the above at the time of birth. There was enormous trepidation, there was fear of commitment to democracy. Nitzan, I know you are committed to gender equality even more. Who needs equality? You need more than this. You are a feminist, and I respect it. It's time. Your time has come. Us males, we have destroyed the world long enough, and the time has come for you. All right, but not in 1948. Let me tell you that literally moments before the Declaration of Independence, the formula that we are all proud of, that says full political and social equality, regardless of what? Race, religion, and sex. Now we say gender. Moments before the declaration, gender was not there. The boys did not care. They argued endlessly over whether or not God will be mentioned, Zu Israel or not Zu Israel. And I'm here to tell a story about Zu Israel. But to you, Nitzan, what's important is, in the declaration, is gender, right? Commitment to gender equality. Can you believe this? For 2 days, the leaders, the boys, excluding Golda Meir, the only female person they allowed into the game, but not as a participant. For 2 days, they debated issues like Zu Israel, yes or not, the borders of Palestine, Israel, yes or not, and gender equality was out of the declaration. It is David Ben-Gurion at the actually last physical moment who added gender equality. And since then, we all celebrate the Declaration of Independence, and women are so proud of the fact that even in 48, women equality, gender equality was acknowledged. Well, let me tell you, this was only because David Ben-Gurion, who excelled in so many other aspects, was sensitive enough, clever enough, righteous enough to enter gender equality. Please believe me, minutes before the Declaration of Independence, it said, regardless of race, God forbid. The year is 1948 and they still say race rather than ethnicity or nationhood or peoplehood. They still say race. So moments before the Declaration, it still said regardless, equality, regardless of race and religion. And it only Ben-Gurion, miraculously, on his own, without any support of his entourage, that gender was added. So it's so important to us to believe that this document was the constitutive document, that it was the last era of consensus among Jews, at least, because Arabs were kept out of the game. But let me tell you, there was no real consensus on absolutely any of the points. And your grandfather, Nitzan, signed the declaration. But on Sunday, he said, and his partner in the Aguda, your grandfather was Po'alei Agudat Israel, which is slightly to the left, but to the right of him, not far to the right of him, was Agudat Israel, represented by a person called Levinstein, David Levinstein. And your grandfather and Levinstein, they took the opportunity on the Sunday after the declaration, when David Ben-Gurion allowed comments and reservations about the declaration, both of them, both your grandfather and the Agudat Israel representative, David Levinstein, they actually declared, it's in the protocol, that they had absolutely no part in what they signed for. What they said explicitly is, we signed 2 days ago on the Friday because we needed to present false consensus to the Goyim, to the world, to the Goyim. But we absolutely are not consenting. Your grandfather and Levinstein both said, if it were up to us, Israel will be like Iran, Medinat Halacha. We protest, they both said on Sunday, 2 days after the declaration. Even though we signed the declaration, they both said, we signed it only because we wanted to present a false image of consensus to the Goyim, lest they take the land of Israel away from us. But do we agree? Absolutely not. And they still don't agree. And just look at what happened 2 days ago in Bnei Brak. They still don't agree. But we don't need the myth that in 48 there was agreement. There was no agreement. There was no consensus. There was exactly the same separation that poisons our life today.
Yoram, can you elaborate on the point of no consensus apart from Kalman Kahana and the other and his other partner? Were other parts of the People's Assembly showing their objection after the document was signed?
Absolutely. They're revisionists. This is what Bibi and his supporters are called. It used to be called the revisionist right wing, the national, Jabotinskyites. They protested, actually even on Friday, but they were ignored. But again on Sunday. What they said was, Ben-Gurion, so you promised and we signed to the principle of equality, but how about the rest of constitutional rights? How about the freedom of assembly? How about the freedom of speech? How about the freedom of conscience? Our conscience is different than yours. We assemble against you, not in it, actually not far, but Balfour Street existed back in 48. They assembled in different places, the right-wingers. And they said to Ben-Gurion, why is the Declaration of Independence silent on constitutional issues that are of interest to us? Why are you committing to the nearly meaningless, empty commitment to equality regardless of race, religion, and yes, Nitzan, at the last moment, gender?
Well,
and Ben-Gurion said to them, again, I must stress this because it's in the protocol. It's actually open to any Hebrew reader. perhaps in translation, but what Ben-Gurion said was, look, right wing, left wing, there were real left wings at the time, they were called the communists. Can anybody remember that there were communists in 1948? Yes, there was a communist party in 1948, far to the left of Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion was not left, Ben-Gurion was center, in exactly the way that the center is center today. So the far left, the communist, protested the fact that there was no commitment to Stalinist-like, can I repeat the slogans of the Bolshevik communist era of the time? What the communists were saying on both Friday and the Sunday, this is the Declaration of Independence is merely a wishy-washy, not capitalist, that's a expression we use today. What they said was colonialist commitment, wishy-washy, quasi-liberal commitment to empty values. Why not commit to world equality, achvat amim, Stalin be the son of the son Shemesh of Shemesh Amim, the son of the nations. Agudat Israel was seeking Medinat Halacha. The Stalinists were seeking a Stalinist communist world community. The revisionists were seeking a Eretz Israel Hashlema and a basic commitment to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and other values. And Ben-Gurion, you know what his answer was? At these days of seeming consensus, Ben-Gurion says, look, guys, do you take any of this seriously? This is not for local consumption. This is not for real. This is for the goyim. This is for the goyim. We need something for the goyim to get us through this interim stage of unilateral declaration of independence that was not recognized by absolutely anyone, including Harry Truman, okay? Because even Harry Truman was fooled into, was deceived into recognizing, even de jure, the state of Israel. If you want the story, I can tell, but I think we are running short of time. So I can tell the story of the way Truman signed a recognition, a document of recognition on the basis of deception. So it's a good story. It's nice.
Well, why don't you take a few minutes and share that with us? And then we'll move forward if you can do that. But before that, I have one quick question.
Okay.
Do you believe that the signers believed that following this document, there would be a constitution written that would go into all these different areas? Or anyone else, please jump in. Nitzan, you were smiling.
I know. I don't know if anybody has other information. I know for sure that a couple of the grandchildren who were interviewed in the film talked to us about it and said that they knew their grandparents were waiting for the process of writing a constitution, and some of them were actually very disappointed by the fact that it never made it into actual law, and more than that, the questions themselves were not further debated. This, I think, can be understood in a time when there's basically one ruling political party, and when there's war and financial hardships, and it's just the beginning of the country, and everybody says, okay, let's just wait with it, with this constitution thing for later, and somehow 70 years pass by. But I think that many of the sort of constitutional crises that we are still facing today is because we do not have a constitution.
May I say that I have no doubt that on a very superficial level, at least the majority of the signatories assumed there will be a constitution. But what I mean by very superficial level is that they did not think it through. And it's very easy to agree to this idea of consensus and a constitution. But when it came to details, the few who did think it through realized that it was not realistic to achieve enough consensus to constitute a constitution. Here's one example. A bunch of, how can I tell them? How can I describe them? Legal advisors to the nascent, not yet a real Ministry of Justice, but a bunch of guys who actually worked in the for the Jewish agency at the stage when the state was conceived and different drafts of the Declaration of Independence were sort of shuffled around. So at some stage, the word democratic state still appeared in one of the drafts, and the commitment to real and full equality. So one of the legal advisors wrote the following comment. And may I say that this legal advisor would rise later to be the head of the legislation department of the Ministry of Justice and professor of the Hebrew University, the law faculty of the Hebrew University. I mean, actually became a very famous jurist in the future. His name was Uri Yadin. And Yadin wrote the following comment. Guys, he said, we cannot possibly commit to democracy and to equality, let alone, Nitzan, gender equality, when we already know, because of a number of reasons, including internal politics of the Zionist movement, that family disputes will, in the future state, be decided by rabbinical courts. And as long as rabbinical courts will, and probably forever, not allow women, because they're women, to testify, to be edim, to be edot in their own legal process against their husbands, even if they are violent to them or for any other reason, then says Uri Yadin, how on earth can we commit to gender equality? We are not going to be a really and seriously democratic, gender equal community. So let's not play games. We are not going to be fully democratic. So let's not commit to democracy. Now, later generations, my own generation says, they did not know that Aaron Barak, right? I assume that you know what this specter is used in the present generation, as if it is only if the Supreme Court of the state is the real danger to the Jewish character of the state. that we did not, that it was dangerous to commit to democracy and equality in 1948. But back in 1948, Aaron Barak was still in Latvia. He was still a refugee. He did not even arrive in Palestine at the time. And Uri Yadin is honest enough to say, there is no way to have a state that is both fully democratic and fully Jewish. One of them has to give. And what the forefathers gave was democracy, not Jewishness. The state of Israel was declared as a Jewish state and not a Jewish and democratic state. And we absolutely have to live with it. And it's the burden of the left, whatever is left of it. Oh, that's a pun. What's left, whatever is left of the left in Israel has a huge burden because it cannot rely on a false romantic narrative of a democratic past. The past was not democratic. It's up to us, whoever is remained, to at least save some democracy in the state of Israel.
So Nitzan, I'm sorry to interrupt you. As a member of the younger generation, the new generation, and Udi, what's your comments on that and the hope for that to happen?
Udi, you should start.
I first of all, I think wanted to give a little bit of context. I don't know if everybody who just heard Yoram know, he mentioned Aaron Barak, and I think you're referring, Yoram, to the constitutional what's known as the constitutional revolution in Israel. And I think for me, and probably for you as well, Nitzan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for people who grew up in Israel of the late 80s and early 90s, and this is when Aaron Barak is it called chairman? President of the Supreme Court, right? Yeah. As president of the Israeli Supreme Court, really started a big drift in how Israeli law was interpreted, and in a way gave more balance to issues of equality than to, let's say, the Jewish aspects of the country. For people who grew up at that time, at least for me, I think this is part of the reason why I took it for granted that Jewish and democratic are both in the declaration. I never thought that it's a fully democratic or a fully Jewish state. I always knew it from childhood as a conflict, as a question. Even in school, I don't think they talk about it really much these days, but at least in the early 90s, they were still talking about this clash between Jewish and democratic. I remember the debates about it, but for me, it was clear that this question was there from the get-go, and so I was also sure that it will be in the declaration. I personally think that even the reality that led to the establishment of the country in 1948 has changed dramatically. The demographics of who is living here today and the political reality that we live in today, I think, calls for an entirely new approach. If I have to comment on the declaration itself, there are many beautiful ideas in the declaration. Some of the issues that I would like addressed are addressed on a very superficial layer, but they are addressed. But I do think that it's missing a lot of things for it to really be a founding document that the entirety of the people living under the rule of this country could, to a certain degree, identify with or sort of feel home within. I don't think, we had another discussion a while back with when the film was first screened in Israel, and we had a discussion with non-Jewish non-Jews about the film, and I found it very interesting. Yulie I was only a listener. Yulie was in that discussion, and I found it fascinating that we I think as Jews were trying to understand what needs to be changed in the document in order for it to sort of be relevant for non-Jews as well, to be relevant for everyone. Even on the theoretical level of if we would change the document. And I think what I was getting from them was that it's not that the document needs to be deleted, or revised, the document does not talk about everyone. It talks only about the Jews. And if we do want to have some kind of but some kind of base or like ethos text, I don't know, for this country, and we all realize that that needs a revision because the questions are still unanswered and a large portion of the population is still not included in the discussion. And if we do want to do these things, we probably need to draft a new text, not deleting the Declaration of Independence, but probably building on it or sort of inventing a new format for this text, be it a constitution or anything else. But I think I feel that there is quite a large, that if there is some kind of consensus in Israel today is that there is a need for a revision of or addressing these fundamental questions again. And I think with every year that passes and as the more the political divide and the political crisis in this country worsens, the more it's clear that we need to think about the basics, not only the end questions. But Nitzan, I'm curious to hear if you've ever had.
I don't think there's much to add after what you said. You said it so amazingly. But what are you curious to hear about?
No, I mean, have you ever had? I know you're very fond of or very. I always find you to be very sort of emotional, understandably, towards that text, and very proud of it. Which I assume I would be too if it was my grandfather. And I always wondered if you were given the chance to change things in it, or if you would write a new document altogether, what do you think you would address today? I'm just curious for your opinion. I don't want you to criticize your grandfather or them. It's a totally different context. But what would you want seen today?
And let me just add to that, one of our participants just wrote that it needs an amendment, one or two amendments. So it could be an amendment or rewrite.
So I think Udi said it just right. I'm very much emotional about that, probably because it's like my family legacy. But I have to say, my family legacy is very emotional. I feel like my life are like the tension between democratic and Jewish. I lived as a religious but almost secular girl with ultra-Orthodox family. But my grandfather, who came here as a refugee, as Yoram said, became a member of the Knesset. But his brother, who was not ultra-Orthodox, was actually secular, went to the Supreme Court and was the president of it, Nitzan Kahana. And just a few days ago, when seeing what's happening in our Knesset and the way that people talk, I saw this, actually this interview we have a member of the Knesset, her name is Osnat Mark. She's very known for talking very loud, I'll say. And people asked her, why are you talking that way? Why you curse on TV? And she said, I'm right wing and the left will never accept me. And my people, my base, he likes me when I talk like that. So I actually wrote about it in an article saying that I'm very sorry, but I cannot accept that when people go to our parliament. Because when you talk like that, it influences on what you're dealing with. Because even in a pandemic, and we're not in a good situation, these are our days, it just gets worse every day. The only thing you issue is how much you hate the left, and you're not talking about the people that become like poor, hungry, about the dead, about the sick. All you care about is making your base happy. And I have to say that her base is also sick and also get poorer. So I wrote about one thing that it's like it came to me while watching TV in her interview, that when I was 17 in our garden, something happened that I never thought can happen. My ultra-Orthodox family is very religious. Yoram said that my grandfather said 2 days after the declaration, I did it for the goyim. You know what, Yoram? So he said that. He signed the declaration. If he wants for his people or for his conscience to feel good and say, I did it for the goyim, I don't believe in it, at least he signed that. So my family is really, really lives in the very close neighbors in Jerusalem, at Bnei Brak. And also in our family gathering, they sit separately, men and women, husbands and wives, always. I almost don't see my uncles. And when I was 17 in our garden, there was cousins gathered together, my ultra-Orthodox family, and Nitzan Kahana from the Supreme Court, son's family, most of them secular from the kibbutz. And they sat together, all in our garden, the same tables, men and women, and looked at each other's eyes and realized their family. And I remember, although I was young, I saw that thing and I realized what solidarity really means and what family really means. Now, I am, as you understood already, I guess, I'm left-wing. I really, I have a lot of, I feel responsibility being a majority in Israel to minorities here. And I think we need to give more attention to towards not just rights, but also, sorry, English in this hour. הגדרה עצמית.
Self-determination.
Both Palestinians and Israeli Palestinians. But seeing that, I realized it can be here so much better. Sorry, I get it. As I said in the beginning, I'm a believer. I would not touch the Declaration of Independence of Israel because I don't think we have the right, even if I'll be in a more important positions in Israel. But as Udi said, I do believe we are ready to write a new, better, not by mistake putting things inside, but clearer, more respecting document. Chukah, can't believe I forgot that word, being a lawyer. A constitution. And one last sentence I have to say to Yoram, being a law student many years ago, one of my first year in the Hebrew University, I think the thing that we heard most was that it was definitely known to everybody that the Constitution will be made in Israel in the first days and years, and there was the word, like they told us all the reasons why not, but it said like everybody knew it's gonna happen. So you broke another myth to me today.
But can I say, I read the questions on chat, and I find that many of the participants, I find that's a bit patronizing, but that I don't think that Jews, both in Israel and abroad, and especially in America, absolutely really realize the real dilemma. Because one of the participants asked about, so what's wrong with Jewish democracy? Here is what's wrong with Jewish democracy. In America, you don't have Christian democracy, for goodness sake. You have universal democracy, or immigrant until the time of Trump, God forbid, not Trumps in the plural, only Trump. And America may heal from this idea of white supremacy or Christian supremacy over any other denomination. And yet American Jews, and to my total horror, even Israeli Jews, think of democracy only in the context of Jewishness. But please realize that back in 48, these clever guys, these clever Jews, both back in 48, realized, including your grandfather Kahana, that there was no Jewishness and democracy. The state is going to be Jewish. It cannot be democratic. So this is a choice we still have to face today, both in Bnei Brak and in Nachlat Binyamin or Schenken. We are divided by very different views of what the state of Israel should be. And it is too romantic and too naive to assume that it can be both. It cannot be both. If Jews, very innocent and very honest Jews in San Diego, believe that there should be a state in the world where Jewishness can be democratic, what I say to them is, forget it. States cannot be both religious or national or ethnic and democratic. In San Diego, you expect separation of state and ethnicity unless you are a white supremacist who raids the Congress as a terrorist act, right? You cannot be both.
Yes, but
democracy is a very, very debilitating.
But Rega, Professor Shacher.
Concept. And you cannot have both. So it's absolutely okay. Your grandfather Kahana he was absolutely clear about the choice. What he declared in the future Knesset, it was not called the Knesset, was we have not survived 2,000 years of persecution to create a sort of a neutral immigrant state for every ethnicity. This is what your grandfather said. We are here to create a Jewish state. If it is Jewish, it cannot possibly be democratic.
Thank you, Professor Yulie.
And there's no way around it. And we romanticize about the dilemma. We have to solve it. If you want to be democratic,
Wait, Yoram, 1 second.
Almost either non-Jewish or at least very almost non-Jewish. We have to be so dilutedly Jewish that it won't mean much in the ways of grandfather Kahana. So this is the dilemma, and it has not been solved either in 48 or in 2020.
Yulie, you wanted to say something? I'm intrigued.
Yes, I wanted to.
Thank you, Yoram. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to mention the fact that although the US is much more democratic than the state of Israel for sure, I just wanted to mention a few examples of using Christianity in the US, like George Bush saying, God send me to Iraq. And he starts the war in Iraq. And he says, God send me to Iraq. And, you know, when Biden comes in, he starts at the church before he comes to his
inauguration.
Exactly, yeah. So also in the US, I mean, using God a lot, and all God, I mean, not the Jewish God, but the Christian God. So I think that our challenge in Israel is to revise our democracy in a way that it will be much more pluralistic to non-Jews as well, because we are not in 48 and we are much more stronger and we are not refugees anymore. And Israel is not a refuge state anymore as it used to be. And I hope that soon we will have a different generation, like the generation that is going to Balfour every Saturday and demonstrate. I really believe that we can be optimistic because the generation are changing now, and people want to be more free and liberal. And I mean, demographically, we have a problem because the Haredic part is really high percentage, and also the Arabs as well. So we're not sure yet what will come, but I think we can put the past aside and look forward to a more democratic state and less Jewish state. Yes, this is my opinion. Yeah, for the future.
One thing I wanted to note, just to be sure that, just to point something out, I think that when we talk about, we tend to, I think, mix these questions or these two sides, the Haredi or the ultra-Orthodox and the secular, and the question about Jewish and democratic. And I think that the interesting thing for me is that within the Jewish secular communities, I think the percentage of people who would be willing to change the balance or to sway the balance towards democratic is not very high. When you sort of detail what that means, what kind of laws have to be put in place, what kind of privileges have to be given up in order for that to be the reality, the law of the land. I think even within the Israeli secular, Jewish secular society, the percentage of people who would sway to that direction would be very, very low. For many understandable reasons and justifications that we will not probably solve or get to the bottom of in this discussion today. It's been going on for 70 years and it will probably go for many years more. But I think it's, for me, at least I have to say personally, from working on this film, it was and it still is the most interesting question of the fundamental questions of our lives here.
Yes. Udi, thank you for that. We could go on and on. Unfortunately, we're at our hour. So I thank you so much for bringing this to San Diego. It's very, very timely, and we're very proud that that the MGSDII can bring these type of conversations to our city and our country. I know a lot of people have written questions, and we'll try to ask the panel to answer it and send it to you. A question in different forms that came through many, many times is the issue of anti-Semitism and white supremacy. I'm sorry, in this country and really all around the world, and the need for there to be a Jewish homeland, and does that take precedent over democracy? And I think that's what we've been debating all along, and we'll need a lot of time to hash that out more. So thank you. Does anyone want to do a quick closing comment, because we're really out of time, but I want to give you the opportunity for any closing comments.
To that note, for me, just one thing, to that note, the question you were just talking about, I think I definitely, it's a reoccurring thing in the discussion, I think, between Israeli Jews and American Jews specifically, but Jews from elsewhere in the world as well. Yes. Our experiences are tremendously different. Those of us who grew up in Israel are used to living life as a majority. That has certain privileges, it has a certain degree of security. We enjoy certain things that many Jews around the world, although this is not the 30s and the situation is different, many Jews across the world do not experience. And I'm sure that in light of the recent events and the recent political climate in the United States in the last 4 years, even more people have experienced anti-Semitism, and life looks different. I think the discussion about the Jewish nature of Israel, or the rights Israel should grant Jews in particular, is definitely a discussion I see a reason to sort of include not only American, but Jews from the diaspora in, because I know that for many Jews around the world, Israel is a very important sort of security, I don't know, a kind of, not only insurance, but a place where you know that gives you a certain degree of security. And that's not something I want to disrespect. But I do think that on the contrary to that, we always need to remember that people are also living here, and the people who are living here are also living the consequences of this, again, clash between Jewish and democratic. So I think part of the reason I really wanted to bring this specific film to Jewish audiences around the world is to start debating this question. I think it's a question that Jews in Israel debate a lot, and I think it's a question that Jews elsewhere in the world need to start debating as well.
Thank you so much. Yulie, would you like to say something?
No, I agree with Udi. I think, yeah, it's time. I mean, I want, my next film is going to be about democracy. I mean, this is one of the things that I'm really bothered about is democracy. What is democracy and why we need democracy? Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we'll look forward to that.
Can I say?
Yes, of course.
One of the participants said, and I have full respect for it, that I am annoying, and I repeat myself.
I wasn't going to bring that up.
No, I love it. That is the point. It's for American Jews to realize that Jewish democracy is white supremacy. And if you absolutely detest it in America, you should reject it in Israel. And this is a point of discussion. And if this is annoying, this is exactly the point, I think, of this panel. And thank all the participants and thank the producers of this movie, and thank you all for bringing this up. We are annoying. This is the point.
But I will then have to say, just in one last sentence, Yoram, that we'll have to disagree. I believe that Israel can be a Jewish democracy. I believe there is a long way to go there. I don't have the answers yet how we will do that. But I'm here with a lot of my friends, young liberal friends, to fight for that. And I'm sure we're gonna speak again about that issue.
Yeah. Thank you both. Thank you all so very, very much. And again, I'm very proud to bring these voices to the other side of the world in California. Just a couple of announcements. The link will be live to watch the film again through the end of the week, and then it won't be live anymore. So if you'd like to watch it again or share it, you have to the end of the week. And please visit our website to find out about our future events coming up. Thank you so much. Thank you all. We really, really appreciate hearing your opinions. And
thank you, Susan. Thank you for allowing this discussion. We always value these opportunities. Thank you so much.
Thank you.